Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, a few days ago, we talked about Sergeant Scholz's speech at Charles University in Prague, where he envisaged this greatly expanded European Union and Germany's central role within this European Union. And we noted that the speech actually generated very little attention. Well, Sergeant Scholz the other day went to the Bundeswehr and now envisaged a greatly expanded German army within a European army. And again, very little attention because Sergeant Scholz is making all the right pro-NATO, pro-American, and virulently anti-Russian noises. And so I think, oh, that's great. And we have the right-wing libertarians who think that, oh, what a great idea it is if the Europeans just spend more on their military. So they think, oh, this is good. Europeans are stepping up to the plate. But nonetheless, it's an issue that needs to be addressed because we know from history that the Germans are, talented people though they are very prone to hysteria. And the German elite, not necessarily all Germans, but the German elite is now in the grip of an absolutely manic anti-Russian hysteria. We see it in the pronouncements of Sergeant Scholz, of his foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Union. And if we know something about history, we always need to be very worried when the Germans suddenly become very hysterical, and particularly on the topic of Russia. So I just want to show you some highlights from this Scholz speech before the Bundeswehr. And here he talks about, I have described Russia's war as a turning point because it goes far beyond the wars and conflicts we have seen in and around Europe since the end of the Cold War. Here, a highly armed nuclear power is attempting to use force to redraw borders in Europe. If Russia got away with it, our peace in Europe would be gone for a long time. Only someone who does not hear and read what President Putin says and writes can doubt that. He wants to establish Russia as an imperial power in Europe, with maps of the Tsarist Empire or the Soviet Union in mind. Now, there's a number of things you can say about that, one of which is that it's a pack of lies. There's nothing here, nothing at all in anything that Putin says that he wants to revive the Soviet Union, wants to revive the Tsarist Empire, that he's threatening Europe. This is entirely invented by Scholz.
This is this kind of Eurocrat terminology because you didn't start with the first sentence, you start with the second one. Unembellished. Well, everybody, this is completely embellished. Okay.
Unembellished, yes.
Let's see here, what was it here? Here we go. If Russia got away with it, our peace in Europe. Well, look, I mean, Yugoslavia was forcefully and illegally dismantled. And I don't know, George, I have a good grasp of geography, but I would say Yugoslavia was in Europe, okay?
I would say so.
The United States spearheaded that. It's a nuclear power as well. And it was done, maybe not the primary goal, but certainly secondary goals was to punish then Russia, okay, that was on its knees. So this is completely embellished.
Exactly.
And sorry, Sergeant Scholz, if you read, and George and I have quoted it ad nauseum, speeches that Putin have made, they're all made public and they're open to interrogation. There is nothing about Tsarist maps of the Tsarist Empire or anything about the Soviet Union. As a matter of fact, Vladimir Putin regrets the Soviet Union.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. He's extremely critical of the Soviet Union, particularly Lenin and the way Lenin drew up the maps. But above all, he said explicitly that we can't, I think he said something like, anyone who doesn't feel nostalgic about the Soviet Union has no heart. Anyone who wants to bring the Soviet Union back has no brain. So that he said there's no way you can bring it back. But again, it's very interesting that these European elites want to put out this absolutely phony story, which has no evidence that Putin threatens peace in Europe. It's Europe that is elected to get itself involved in Ukraine, in this conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Scholz got elected to get involved in that.
Exactly. Again, Russia is threatening Europe, but by Europe's only actions, Russia felt threatened and reacted. That will never come out from these people, ever, because it is impossible that they have made any minute error, okay, because they are the leading voices of the faith, okay. He's definitely a cardinal in all of this, okay, if not the Pope of it all in Europe.
That's right. That's exactly right. So then he goes on, for us, this means that we have to be prepared for the fact that Putin's Russia will define itself for the foreseeable future as opposed to us, to NATO and to the European Union, which, by the way, Putin has never accepted as a key political actor and has always fought against. This is a sobering analysis when you think of Mikhail Gorbachev, who died a few days ago, and all the hopes that many of us attached to the end of the Cold War. Now,
you're the one that hoped Gorbachev would succeed because he failed. Go ahead.
Exactly. But he says Putin defines himself in opposition to us. That's classic case of projection. It's Europe, the Europe of today, of Scholz and von der Leyen and Liz Truss, who are defining themselves in opposition to Russia. They made Russia the enemy. Russia has never said NATO and the European Union is the enemy. They always talk politely, our European partners, always, our American partners. They've never spoken about them in the way that people like Scholz speak about Russia.
And Putin has never accepted as a key political actor. That's always funny. There is no evidence of that whatsoever. That's a completely false statement. It's NATO and the European Union that have belittled and found Russia, the Russia of today, as being illegitimate. It's only one way.
Exactly.
And again, the sobering analysis. This is trickery. Okay, this is just trickery.
Right. Exactly. So then he goes on. However, the clarity about Russia's motives, at least as long as Putin is president, has another consequence. There is no longer any doubt as to what we must prepare ourselves for. Putin's Russia, and we are preparing for this within the framework of NATO, is currently the greatest threat to our alliance. That's why we have to take a very close look at what capabilities and potential Russia has. A sober look at the realities and risks is required. Now, when you look at that, I read that as a call to war. He's basically saying we have to prepare for war with Russia. I mean, when he says there is no longer any doubt as to what we must prepare ourselves for. Putin's Russia is currently the greatest threat to our alliance. That's why we have to take a very close look at what capabilities and potential Russia has. Now,
George, we've heard this speech in the 1930s. Exactly. One could accuse Sergeant Scholz of basically plagiarism here. Okay, and I say that with no great pleasure. Okay, right. Because we all know what happened in the 1940s. Right. Okay,
right.
But again, this projection here. No longer in doubt as to what we must prepare ourselves for. So as you're preparing, Russia is not going to prepare either. They have no agency. They stand in some kind of vortex where time and change doesn't occur. So this is classical geopolitical maneuvering. Okay, I mean, if you mobilize, then that means I'm good. You mobilize, and I have to mobilize. I don't even actually have a choice. If you mobilize, I have to mobilize. Okay,
that's right.
And initiate.
That's it. That's exactly it. And when Russia reads things like this, you kind of understand why it is that Russia has used only about 10% of its armed force in Ukraine. I mean, they're obviously holding back the bulk of their armed forces. Because, you just don't know what the hell NATO is going to do. But they're not committing the bulk of their armed forces in Ukraine. Everyone had expected that that's what Russia would do. Russia has not done so. So, Russia has to make calculations for what's going on in Europe. And when they read speeches like this, they said, we need to be prepared. I mean, any leader who doesn't read that and say, we have to now be prepared for whatever NATO has in mind.
Okay, there is no longer any doubt as what we must do to prepare ourselves for. But you still want energy from Russia. Yeah.
That's right. Well, yes.
Can anybody explain that to me?
Right.
Okay.
But,
And even with all, I don't have the numbers in front of me, George, but even after all of these sanctions, what, 6 or 7 waves of them, there's still trade going on. Okay. There's still trade going on.
That's right. That's
okay. So why, if you have to, why don't you prepare yourself from a complete economic boycott from Russia? Because you won't, because you're not prepared for it, but Russia is, okay, right, because of what you have done.
Yes. Yeah. Because of what exactly. And this is the thing, all these European leaders, again, like Borrell and von der Leyen, who keep saying, we made a great mistake in becoming dependent on Russian energy. Russia is an unreliable partner. Russia is an extremely reliable partner. Russia was a source of cheap energy, of which your prosperity was based. You made a perfectly rational decision. What was an irrational decision was to get yourself in the middle of a conflict that had nothing whatever to do with you. That was an irrational move. But the idea to somehow, Russia is an unreliable source of energy, is you who is an unreliable source of, an unreliable customer.
What, again, when we have, blaming all of the energy woes on Russia is just absolutely, utterly absurd. It goes back way before February 24th, 2022. It's their ridiculous pie in the sky, unicorn, Green New Deal, okay? That you weren't prepared for that, okay? Right. You weren't, and so what they're doing is they're George, even if everything was completely quiet in Ukraine, Europe would be dealing with energy issues, okay? And now it's just much, much worse because of the conflict, but it was already cooked into the bake, okay? Right. So these people are intellectually and morally dishonest.
Absolutely dishonest, absolutely. And then it says, for a long time, our country, and that expressly includes politics, avoided a real prioritization of the Bundeswehr's tasks: drilling wells, securing humanitarian aid, stemming floods, helping with vaccinations in times of a pandemic. A good army like the Bundeswehr can do all of this. Our country also appreciates that very much, especially in recent times, but that is not its core mission. So suddenly,
drum roll.
Yeah, drum roll, exactly. So yeah, all of this, this is what we had associated with the Bundeswehr. No more. And so the core mission of the Bundeswehr is the defense of freedom in Europe, or to put it less lyrically, the defense of the country and the alliance. Everything else derives from this order. All other tasks are subordinate to this order. That is my aspiration as federal chancellor, and I will be measured by it.
Well, he's absolutely right by that. Again, people, gagglers know George and I really are very, very careful when we invoke history. But defense of the country and the alliance, again, this is rhetoric. Western civilization, the Aryan race. I'm sorry, George. This is an echo from the past.
It is. And this whole era, we are going to be defending Europe against this alien, body. And then it says, in my speech on the Bundestag on February the 27th, I said, we will defend every square meter of alliance territory. I mean it very seriously. And it is taken seriously. We have authorized the SACEUR, that's Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, to request and move troops on a massive scale. For the first time ever, NATO had to activate its defense plans on the eastern flank. But this is all.
Okay.
Go on.
Yeah, but George, I mean, particularly, and even before, but particularly a nice line that we can draw in the sand is the coup in 2014. Immediately after that, NATO, NGOs, the US, the whole ball of wax rolled right into Ukraine, okay? So, we will defend every square meter of alliance territory, but you're meddling outside of the alliance territory.
Exactly.
And you are doing this now as Russia is conducting its special military operation in Ukraine. So what does this have to do with any square meter of alliance territory? No one explains that.
Exactly. What has it got to do with it? And of course, the more NATO expands, the more, oh, well, we're defending this. So again, you are not in any way defensive when you keep expanding and then suddenly, oh, well, hey, this is now NATO territory. We're going to be militarily committed to this. So that is what is known as aggression. You keep just moving your territory closer and closer to Russia's border. Ah, this is now NATO land. We're totally committed. Look, nobody ever claims to be aggressive. Everybody says, hey, I'm defensive. You're aggressive, but I'm defensive. There's nothing new about that. It's so thoroughly disingenuous when NATO to go and say, we're defensive. Well, of course you say you're defensive. Everyone always says that they're defensive. That doesn't mean that you are defensive.
The invasion of Iraq was defensive because of weapons of mass destruction.
Exactly. It was defensive. That's exactly how Bush rationalized it. It's a preemptive war because the imminent threat of an Iraqi attack. There wasn't any attack, but hey, we can't be sure. So it was defensive. It's always defensive. And we are consistently moving forward together in the alliance. The new NATO force model will make us in the alliance even more extensive, flexible, and responsive from 2025 onwards. The substantial German contribution of 30,000 soldiers, 85 aircraft and ship will drastically increase NATO's responsiveness and deterrent effect. And then Germany played an important role in all of this right from the start. That was very important to me. As a result, there are hundreds of German soldiers in the Baltic states, in Romania and Slovakia. Our Navy and Air Force are patrolling the Baltic Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean more intensively. This is more than reassurance to our Eastern allies. It is about our security, which is inseparable from the security of our allies. And at the same time, we make it credibly clear Germany is ready to assume leadership responsibility for the security of our continent. Yes. Leadership responsibility for the security of our continent.
And by the way, Europe, you better chip in to help Germany with its energy woes, okay?
Yes.
Because we're protecting the entire alliance, okay? You must serve our needs, okay? And you have to buy our products because we're export driven, okay? Yep. I mean, again, these echoes come from everywhere. Hundreds of German soldiers in the Baltic states. Well, maybe that's true in Romania. When's the last time that happened?
That's right. Well, and as you say,
were they invited or did they have to be kicked out? Okay.
Yes, quite so. And as you say, nothing is for free. So Germany will want something in return for that. It's rather like this business of which we talked about, and we'll talk about again, the Ukrainian grain that was supposed to feed the hungry of the world, but for some strange reason, it's not reaching the hungry, but is reaching Europe. Hey, Ukraine was always going to have to pay for all the arms that were being shipped into Ukraine. Yeah, hey, nothing is for free, and suddenly all this grain is going to Europe. And and Gutierrez, the UN Secretary General, he goes to like, oh, the hungry are not getting their food. No, I mean, of course the hungry aren't getting their food. That was never the plan. The plan was always to get the grain from the Ukraine Black Sea ports and into Europe to reduce grain prices in Europe.
And German soldiers garrisoned in the Baltic states, in Romania and Slovakia. I guess the Baltic states, Romania, and Slovakia will pay for that garrison. That's how it works, everyone, okay? That's how it works. And, preferential trade, that's part of the deal as well,
right?
Okay?
Yes.
And let's just let's just say the obvious. Berlin's the capital of Europe. That's where it's going.
That's right. That's right. So
And everybody, this doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't. You know, Germany could say, look, the security environment in Europe is in tatters. The NATO has been a disaster for our security, and Germany, being the leading country of Europe economically and population-wise, we say we need to speak with our adversary, the Russians, and we need to come to a peace agreement. That could happen. Now, of course, political lives would be destroyed, and you would go, the media would go after you. But no, you know, get along. You go along, get along, and that's what they're doing. And
but that's exactly it. That's what's so peculiar about this, because you know you have German industrialists who would say, "Hey, we need cheap energy from Russia, and we need the Russian market for our goods. Hey, it's a win-win. It makes sense for everybody." But instead, we're getting all this nonsense from the Scholzes and the von der Leyens and Annalena Baerbocks, in which they're doing this for what reason? Why are they doing this?
They're doing it, George, for the new empire.
Right.
That's what they're doing it for. That's what happened in the 1930s.
Yeah.
Look, you know, when people look at German conquering Europe, that's the end. Okay, and then they were destroyed by the Red Army. But all through the 1930s, every single country, special trade relationship, you must buy in Deutschmarks. All of these things, controlling banks, okay? This is part of the same thing. So what Sergeant Scholz is doing is saying, and when he says the European Union, he's saying Germany's interests. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's right. And then here is the kicker. As the most populous nation with the greatest economic power, and as a country in the middle of the continent, our army must become the cornerstone of conventional defense in Europe, the best equipped armed force in Europe. That is the goal. And the fact that our European friends and partners do not perceive this goal as a threat, but on the contrary, as an assurance and promise, should be an incentive for us. You know, we fooled them. You know, in other words, we fooled them. You know, they take this to be, you know, oh, you know, good old Hans. You know, Hans and Heinrich do their thing. You know, good. You know, we fooled them.
I'm sorry, Sergeant Scholz says, have you checked public opinion poll of your European friends and partners before you made this speech here? I think that there's going to be, oh, George, as a sidebar, you know, the Poles are suing the Germans for reparations for the Second World War. Scholz, Poland is one of your European friends and partners. Actually, it's a neighbor of yours, okay?
Right.
So yeah, it's really quite amazing. It's like the emperor, the king of France. I am France, and so Scholz is saying, I am Europe. Okay,
that's right. And it's interesting when you mention that about Poland, because Germany's argument against Poland is that, hey, this was all settled when you signed this deal in 1953 with East Germany. That's good. That's binding for us. So here's Scholz going on about democracy and freedom and sovereignty and so on, but he's very quick to accept as legally binding an agreement between the communist Poland and communist East Germany. That's it, binding, you know, good enough for us. Hey, but I thought that you know, everything's supposed to be democracy. I mean, you cursing out Putin, you know, Putin's Russia, you know, that's a hell of a lot more democratic than the Soviet Union that compelled Poland and East Germany to sign this waiver.
Well, I don't want, you could say I'm picky here, but talking about legally binding, well, Germany and France were signatories to the Minsk process. They didn't cough up the goods there. I mean, everybody, why are George and I doing this? Okay, because, and we're probably older than most people watching it, I would assume. A German chancellor hasn't talked like this for not in our lifetime, not in my lifetime, and not in George's lifetime. Okay, that's so peculiar and important.
That's right. That's exactly it, because we're so used to the talk that you see, particularly in the days of Brandt and Schmidt, and the Christian Democrats that followed Brandt and Schmidt. So no, you have nothing to worry about. This is a different Germany. This is not the Germany of the 1930s, not the Imperial Germany, of the Kaiser and so on. This is a new, different Germany. You have nothing to worry about us. And now we need this kind of talk.
And we got a taste of the preamble, everyone. COVID. That was the preamble, okay? It was the warm. So when things cool down, are they going to be coercive? Are they going to use the force of the state to demand people to behave in certain ways, like not to protest high energy prices or protest brownouts or blackouts, okay? I mean, this is softening up the public here, okay? And George, the promise of empire, we've heard this too, okay? Oh, sure, there'll be problems here, but we will overcome because we will have a greater Germany, Germany's place in Europe. That's right. This is all recycled, folks.
That's right, exactly. The central role of Germany in Europe. And then, but I also know the men and women of the Bundeswehr, all of you can do it with the backing of those responsible politics. Incidentally, you have proven in the 7 months since the beginning of the war, in which you and your comrades have worked everywhere, whether on the eastern flank, in the training of Ukrainian soldiers, in increasing operational readiness, in handing over and acquiring new material, in the development of new rules and concepts. You've shown the highest level of responsibility and commitment. And I would like to ask you, please pass on my appreciation and my thanks to the troops. So the Bundeswehr has been very actively involved in the training of Ukrainian soldiers. Again, you see, the Germans, they're very cute in, wanting to present themselves because they kind of know that people look upon them with some nervousness. So they want to present themselves, well, we're very, very peace-loving. We're very pacifist. We have our history. It really weighs on us. We feel so bad about, all the terrible things that were done in our names. We're just, we have a reluctance to get involved in things like this. They have no reluctance. They always get involved. There's never been any war, any conflict that Germany has not supported. But they're very good at putting on this act of, sackcloth and ashes act.
This is not reluctance. And were they reluctant to recognize Croatia?
Exactly.
As soon as there was reunification. No, we're a new Germany. We're never going to let this happen again. And then it was a matter of weeks and months.
Exactly. It was just
they stick their beak into breaking up a state in Europe.
That's right. That's it. Exactly. And broke ranks with the rest of Europe. They ignored, at that moment, there was still a European front, which is no recognition for unilateral secession. They could dismiss all of the European concerns, even the American concerns. They just went ahead and recognized Croatia and Slovenia. So, after all that talk, no, nothing to worry about from us.
Well, I don't know about you, but whether on the eastern flank, my brain keeps clicking to front, the eastern front. Because that's what it sounds like.
It does indeed, yes.
Because, again, I don't want to be pedantic, everyone. Ukraine is not a member of NATO. So why is Germany involved in a conflict in Ukraine?
Yes, sir. Yeah, exactly.
It's certainly not for Ukraine's democracy, which Ukraine now is a military junta.
That's right. That's it. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And then with its strategic compass, the European Union has also positioned itself more clearly and cohesively. For me, the results in the division of labor that will strengthen European security in the long term. NATO remains responsible for the collective defense of the entire alliance area, and with a focus on Europe. Credible deterrence remains the core element, but we Europeans have to take on much more responsibility within NATO. The fact that Finland and Sweden, two European countries with modern and capable armies, are about to join NATO is therefore very welcome. Now notice what he says here. The fact that Finland and Sweden, two European countries with modern and capable armies, are about to join NATO is therefore very welcome. But I thought Finland and Sweden were these petrified little mice, absolutely, in dread. Oh God, Russia's going to invade, Russia's going to invade. Please help us, help us, help us. But no, they apparently have modern and capable armies, and they are strengthening NATO. Huh, that's a little different. I mean, I'm getting confused now.
I think, George, I think I'm not mistaken, calling Finland and Sweden countries with modern and capable army. I've never heard that before. Have you?
No.
No, it's because both just have they have more like a national guard that basically deals with poaching, contraband, and illegal immigration. That's about the long and the short of it. So
right.
I don't know what Scholz is drinking there, okay?
Right.
And I don't want any, because and plus, George and I have we've gone down this road so many times. With Finland and Sweden joining, it creates even more uncertainty and instability on the European continent. What he's saying is absolutely absurd and provably false.
That's right. That's right. And one will have to say, both Finland and Sweden, like Germany, were kind of on the wrong side of the last war. So we have kind of another problem. More and more of these countries were kind of on the wrong side in that war. So some of the old anti-Russian animus, well, hey, yep. Very, very useful for us. So,
well, I mean, let's just say, George, they know the terrain. Okay?
They know the terrain.
And you know what, Finland, you got such a good deal. Why you're throwing it away now is a complete mystery to me. Okay.
Right. But I want to show you, we talked about this before, so we don't need to go through the speech by Scholz at the Charles University, but there was just one thing that I wanted to point out, which was again quite sinister. When he says, "Our Europe is united in peace and freedom, open to all European nations that share our values. Above all, however, is the practiced rejection of imperialism and autocracy. The European Union does not function through superiority and subordination, but through the recognition of differences, through equality between its members, through plurality and the balancing of different interests." And then, lo and behold, he says here that he talks about any disagreement between us, any weakness, Putin will exploit. So suddenly, hey, no one is subordinate to anyone else. And then you could see he's changing his line, saying, hey, well, we have to have unity here. We have to follow the line. So, for the foreseeable future, Putin's Russia will define itself as opposed to the European Union. Any disagreement between us, any weakness, Putin will exploit. Our other autocrats imitate this. Just think how Belarusian dictator Lukashenko tried last year to put political pressure on us with the suffering of the thousands of refugees and migrants from the Middle East. And then China and others also use the open flanks that we Europeans offer when we disagree. So we don't want to start disagreeing. And then, was this? I'm trying to find this where he talks about the Europe. That's why it worries us when people in the middle of Europe talk about illiberal democracy. I wonder who he's referring to.
I wonder who.
As if that weren't a contradiction in terms. That is why we cannot accept, remember these words, we will not tolerate, we cannot accept when the principles of the rule of law are violated and democratic control is dismantled. To say this very clearly, there must be no tolerance for racism and anti-Semitism in Europe. That is why we support the Commission and its commitment to the rule of law. The European Parliament is also following the issue with great interest. Now, suddenly he's illiberal democracy, and suddenly talk about the anti-Semitism in Europe, and then where he's going says we should not shy away from using all available opportunities to remedy deficits. Polls show that everywhere, including Hungary and Poland, a large majority of citizens would like the EU to do even more to promote freedom and democracy in their countries. One of those options is the rule of law procedure under Article 7. Here too, we need to move away from blocking options. It also seems sensible to me to consistently link payments to compliance with rule of law standards, as we did with the financial framework for 2021 to 2027 and the recovery fund during the Corona crisis. And we should open up a new way for the Commission to initiate infringement proceedings, even if against that which holds us together at the core is violated. So you could say, and then when, if not now, as Russia seeks to shift the line between freedom and autocracy, when will we lay the foundations for an enlarged union of freedom, security, and democracy? If not now, when will we create a sovereign Europe that can hold its own in a multipolar world? And then if not now, when will we overcome the differences that have paralyzed and divided us for years? Who, if not us, could protect us and defend Europe's values, both internally and externally? So you can see here, hey, there's no subordination in Europe. This is sovereign equal states. And then, but if you don't follow the line, we're going to hit you. We're going to make life really miserable for you. So,
well, I mean, who? Sovereign Europe, what does that mean? Has anybody ever voted on that, George?
No.
No. I mean, so they talk about their values, but the one value that they claim to uphold is democracy, but they don't practice it. They're terrified of it.
No, exactly.
Okay? I mean, the governments in Poland and in Hungary are elected over and over again.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, what is through smoke signals or something,
right.
or people? George, you live in Budapest. I mean, is there an armed guard at your door?
No.
I mean,
that's right. But that's interesting.
No, I mean, and who determines what the line is?
That's right. It's determined by these unelected bureaucrats. So these procedures that Scholz says, yeah, we need to initiate these procedures, they are all initiated by unelected bureaucrats who take it upon themselves to overturn the decisions of voters. They initiate these proceedings against Hungary because Hungary doesn't toe the line on this issue and that issue. So they hit Hungary, where you have a government that's now won 4 landslide elections in a row. But Ursula von der Leyen, who has not been elected to anything, she knows better what Hungary should have. And this is the democracy. This is the model of democracy that Scholz is trying to foist on Europe.
Yeah, well, this is what we see with neoliberalism. Diversity is great, but everybody has to think the same way. And that's exactly what he's saying here. Right. Okay, everyone must think exactly the same way in Europe because of Russia. That's okay. Right. No, I mean, that's it. That's their foil. And then in an earlier slide, you showed, we'll not tolerate racism and anti-Semitism. Well, how do you define that? Or is that just a label you put on somebody you don't like?
That's right. That's exactly it. Because he made this seamless transition from talking about illiberal democracy and then talking about racism and anti-Semitism. I mean, the implication there is who talks about illiberal democracy? Viktor Orban. And then there's racism and anti-Semitism. Who defines it? Hey, they can define it anyway. Apparently, if you criticize George Soros, you're anti-Semitic, and that's it. So there it is. We can punish Hungary for criticizing George Soros, who is, of course, himself a Hungarian. But hey, that's anti-Semitic.
All right, everybody, I'll just say it, and maybe I'm narrow-minded, and I'm perfectly willing to be accused of it, but I'm just totally uncomfortable with the German chancellor talking like this. I'm sorry. Okay.
Very uncomfortable.
It was the president of Liechtenstein, or that would kind of have some kind of more moral standing, if I can use that. Right. I mean, because then you're stepping. See, the problem is here. What is right? What is correct? and what is about power. And when you put them together, there's a conflict of interest, okay? You're saying this for reasons of power or because of virtue. I get really worried when someone talks about how virtuous you must be to serve me, to make me worthy of you. It's all, everything is inverted.
That's right. No, that's right. That's why it's so dangerous when you get great powers that essentially adopt for themselves virtue. They declare themselves to be virtuous, and it's the enemy that is that is filled with vice. And so we have to mobilize, because they're against us. They hate us. They're all plotting against us all the time. So we have to mobilize, and that's the classic way that you mobilize the public. You keep
and the fact is, the people of Russia don't hate Europeans.
Right.
They still don't.
That's right.
They still don't.
That's right. That's right.
And George, what again is very curious. I know these are foreign policy pronouncements, but does he ever talk about the German people? No.
No.
What's good for the German people?
That's right.
No. He never mentions that.
No.
It's very curious, isn't it?
That's right. It's very interesting what you said about the lack of the hatred in Russia, because I was watching the Soloviev show, and there was a guy there who was he's a filmmaker. He's a kind of famous Russian filmmaker, and he says that, well, here on Russian TV they're still showing American films. They're showing American TV shows. Why don't we just get rid of them? I mean, and it's an interesting issue. Can you imagine an American TV or any European TV still showing Russian TV shows? No, I mean, that's unthinkable. But here, in Russia, they're still showing American TV.
In Moscow, Russians love these mega malls, big malls. They love to window shop. They like to go out to the food court. They just enjoy it, okay? And you hear Madonna, you hear the Beatles, you hear the Rolling Stones, you hear all of this Western music played and I pointed it out to my girlfriend, and I said, they're nowhere outside of Russia are they playing Russian songs. Well, maybe Belarus, okay, but they're not playing Russian songs, okay? But they constantly play American and English language pop songs, and she said, I like that music, okay, because she doesn't have any animosity.
Right, exactly.
Okay, but the people do tell me is that, why is your government cutting off visas? I didn't do anything wrong, and I just want to go study. Okay,
right,
I mean, it's ridiculous. But again, this hatred goes one way, and they make it sound like I have Russian friends that have Ukrainian family, and they tell me, they say, come to Moscow while this is all going on. No, they'll beat us. They'll lynch us. And they say, no, they won't.
That's right. No, I think that's right. And it was very interesting that Putin was asked whether he will respond to the Europeans who are making visas, will make visas that much more difficult to obtain for Russians. He said, no, we're not going to make that. We will not respond to that. If Europeans or anybody wants to come and study Russia, Russian language, Russian history, they're welcome. We're always welcome to foreigners. It was very pointed. No symmetrical response from Russia, and that's exactly the right attitude to have. Hey, why should we block off access to tourists or students or anyone else who wants to come and see Russia?
It's a one-way street. Yeah. But to kind of put a bow on all of this here, it's really quite remarkable for George and I, having observed most of post-war Germany's history, to have someone of such low aptitude and ability saying the words that he's saying. It should really, it's really quite breathtaking. It should take your breath away.
It should.
We've never heard this, and that's why George and I are putting so much focus on it.
That's right, and that's the thing. Scholz himself is a very nondescript character. I mean, we said before, he looks like a kind of a regional branch, deputy manager. He doesn't have, I don't know, the handsomeness of Helmut Schmidt, or the Willy Brandt's sense of drama when he fell to his knees, and then Helmut Kohl was a very big man. Schroeder was a kind of a very great
Didn't take shit from anybody.
Right. So he's very nondescript in comparison with them. But nondescript people are often the most dangerous, because they can just adopt all these ideas and no one really even notices what's emanating from him. He's gone far beyond anything any post-war German chancellor has said. And people are clapping because, oh, great, Germany's going to step up. It's going to be a leading member of NATO. Hey, that's a serious business. And Russians are watching this very carefully. There's always been a kind of a nightmare that Germany will somehow take over NATO. Once they've shed their, sackcloth and ashes, the post-war guilt, they're going to take NATO over and use it for, as they used to say, revanchist aims. So it is something very concerning.
It's so concerning. You have to remember the logic of NATO membership at its foundation is that, yes, we need NATO to defend against a possible Soviet invasion, which was never in the cards, exactly. Never. Right. But they joined to make sure they could keep an eye on Germany. Okay, all right, we'll join, but we're going to keep an eye on these guys. Okay, right. And all of us together will be able. It takes a village, as they say. Okay, so it takes a continent.
Right.
And now they're flipping the script.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well,
all right, everybody, we're going to keep an eye on Sergeant Scholz. And he's on par with Burrell with his pronouncements. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So
right, anyway. Everybody, this Sunday you got 2 days before Georgia's next live stream.
Exactly, 2 days. So the worst is over. The nightmare of the long weekend is over. Only 48 more hours till my next live stream, Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Please join me. Always a lot of fun. Come with comments, criticisms, suggestions, and on the way out the door to the local watering hole, think about little buddy who's now vanished. He's just disappeared from the scene. From disappointment and kind of Weltschmerz.
Rejection.
Yes, there's a Weltschmerz. Since we're in a German frame of mind. So anyway, but think about him. See if he can, get him to rid himself of his Weltschmerz. So if you have a few coins to rub together, whip them out, dunk them in his tip jar. It'll put a smile on his face. We don't want that. We don't want no chihuahuas, fatwas. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. Bye, buddy.